Jordan Peterson claims to be a scientist. He claims to be a man of science. But the political ideology he presents to the world is really a dangerous mix of religion, just straight up bigotry, and pseudoscience. We have a bit of a sad lesson in seeing the ways in which the next generation then takes his pseudoscientific attitudes and does something even more dangerous with them. Quote, "This is my mom after almost a year of mainly beef and some chicken. She also rarely has lobster and rarely has butter." Pause. If you don't know the situation here, Michaela Peterson decided to get in shape and lose the baby weight after her pregnancy by eating a 100% meat diet. She inspired her parents to also eat a 100% meat diet, her husband to eat a 100% meat diet. And when I say 100% meat, I mean no green vegetables, no bread, no pasta, just meat. And I don't know if she is feeding her infant, if she's feeding her own baby 100% meat, but she posts a lot of pictures to the internet of her feeding this small baby meat. So whether or not it's 100%, I cannot yet say. Oh, but look at this. She just observes that her mother had these problems, and then here's the highlighted text. In 2015, I realized it was probably celiac disease, and she got rid of the rest of the little bits of gluten. She said, oh, you realized it was celiac disease. Does that sound like science to you? Does that sound like science to anyone? Is that how you think the world works? That you just make up your mind that your mom has celiac disease? Or do you think that's something there'd be an empirically real, verifiable, falsifiable scientific process for? Feeling better after changing your diet is not a basis for concluding that you have celiac disease. My grandfather had celiac disease, and he probably died quite a bit younger than he should have for that reason, partly because he compensated by eating quite a lot of red meat. Up to 50% of people with celiac disease are asymptomatic. Serological investigation alone is insufficient to make the diagnosis. Serological means blood tests in plain English. Genotype testing is useful, but doesn't confirm the diagnosis. Definitive diagnosis requires gastroscopy and duodenal biopsy. An empirical trial of a gluten-free diet has no role in the diagnosis of celiac disease. You can see where this article comes from the URL at the top of the screenshot. Gee, that alone sounds like science.
I mean, really, people like to disrespect my crew, but the fact is that you know my name and I don't know you.
I'm making an effort here not to sound like I'm giving a sermon. But in this case, it's hard, because the purpose of this video is to question the noxious and dangerous ideology that Jordan Peterson has propounded to the whole world, an ideology that's very obviously had negative effects within his own family, for his own wife, and most tragically, for his own daughter. I don't want to sound like I'm giving a sermon, but the fundamental problem with a lie is not that it's untrue. The problem with lies is that they resemble the truth enough to influence human decisions, human behavior, human actions. The fundamental danger of pseudoscience is not the extent to which it is unscientific. It's not the extent to which it's non-scientific. The problem with pseudoscience is the extent to which it resembles real science and influences human actions with tragic consequences for us all. Michaela Peterson was raised by Jordan Peterson. She was raised to believe that depression is something biologically real that exists in her body and that can be treated with a magic pill. I use the word magic advisedly. I say this with all due sympathy as someone who was raised by parents who had their own insane ideology, who inculcated lies and half-truths into me. But let's pause to imagine for one moment just how difficult it would be for Michaela Peterson, just how difficult it would be for some true believers in Jordan Peterson's audience to now question and reject the cultic pseudoscientific and debunked notions about depression that Jordan Peterson still propounds and popularizes. How difficult it would be for Michaela Peterson to then question the idea that her depression was caused by eating bread, and that it was cured by eating a 100% beef diet. Her belief, her fad diet that she's propounding, it is pseudoscience. It is crazy. It is insane. But it's pseudoscience built on top of the pseudoscience that her father taught her from her earliest childhood onward.
Half the time I spend with my clients who are depressed is often the 2 years long attempt to get them to tentatively try an antidepressant, because they're so guilty that they're relying on an external crutch to sort out their lives that they can't even tolerate it. But I say, well, look, man, what if you had diabetes? You're not going to take your insulin? It's like, try it, for God's sake. You'll know in a month, and you just stop if it doesn't work.
If you look at the published trials, you'll find that 3 out of 4 of them show a significant benefit of drug versus placebo. If you look at the unpublished trials, that shrinks to 12%. Now we had the published trials, the unpublished trials, we put them all together. We did the same kind of analysis that we did before. And we get this nice healthy response on average to being given the antidepressant drug, and an even bigger response on placebo. Now it's the placebo response, not placebo effect, but we know that that counts for relatively little, the spontaneous remission, the natural history. The placebo response is now accounting for 82% of the response to the active drug. And the difference between drug and approval is less than 2 points on the Hamilton scale. Now, the Hamilton scale, you can have scores ranging from 0 to 53 points. You can get a 6-point difference just by changes in sleep patterns with no changes in any other symptom of depression. That's a small difference. And you don't have to take my word for it, because there's an organization in England called the National Institute of Health and Clinical Excellence. The acronym is nice, and they're a very nice organization. What they do is to set treatment guidelines for the National Health Service. And in revising their treatment guidelines, they have established a criteria for clinical significance for saying that a drug is not only statistically but clinically better than a placebo, and that's a 3-point difference on the Hamilton Depression Scale, or an effect size of 0.5. And as you see, that comes nowhere close. So we went back to our data, and we looked at what drugs were the patients in these studies on. Some were on tricyclics, some were on SSRIs, some were on other antidepressants, included MIO inhibitors and things like that. And we found there were some other drugs in there too. There were some studies that were looking at things like barbiturates and benzodiazepam and lithium for unipolar depression, and thyroid medication for people without a thyroid disorder, unipolar depressed patients. And in case after case, 3/4 of the response to the drug was duplicated by placebo. It didn't matter whether it was a tricyclic, an SSRI, some other antidepressant, or even something that's not conventionally considered an antidepressant. And there's yet another drug that we should take into account that I don't have up here, and that is tianeptine. How many of you have heard of tianeptine? Very few. Tianeptine is a drug that has been approved by French regulators, and it is marketed in France and a number of other countries as an antidepressant. The most common antidepressants these days are SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Tianeptine is an SSRE. It's a selective serotonin reuptake enhancer. It is supposed to do exactly the opposite chemically of what SSRIs are supposed to do. Instead of inhibiting the reuptake so that there's more serotonin available in the synapses, it's supposed to enhance reuptake so that there's less serotonin available in the synapses. Were there any truth to the serotonin theory of depression, and I don't know a responsible researcher in the area that still contends there is. It's only in marketing that you still see that talked about. Were there any truth to that? SSRIs should not help people recover from depression. It ought to make them depressed. Here's what it does. In head-to-head trials against both SSRIs and imipramine and tricyclics. So, what do you call pills, the effects of which are independent of their chemical composition? And they should be taken with a grain of salt.